The gut microbiome angle on creatine is an emerging area of research that's worth covering, even though the full picture is still developing. The core question, does creatine supplementation meaningfully affect the gut bacteria population? And does the gut microbiome affect how well creatine is absorbed and utilized? Starting with absorption in the gut. The primary site of creatine absorption is the small intestine via the SLC6A8 creatine transporter. The large intestine, the primary environment for the gut microbiome, is not where creatine absorption happens. Most creatine that reaches the large intestine intact has either bypassed absorption in the small intestine or was in excess of what the small intestine transporters could handle at that dose. Gut bacteria do metabolize creatine. Certain bacterial species can degrade creatine through enzymatic pathways, converting it to creatinine or further degrading it. This means that if significant amounts of unabsorbed creatine reach the colon, the resident bacteria there can break it down before it has any chance to contribute to your muscle stores. This is one of the pharmacokinetic arguments for avoiding very large single doses. Not just because the intestinal transporters get saturated, but because the overflow creatine that reaches the colon becomes substrate for microbial degradation rather than human absorption. Smaller, more frequent doses maximize the fraction absorbed by human transporters versus the fraction degraded by colonic bacteria. Going the other direction, does creatine affect the microbiome? The research here is limited and primarily from animal models. Some evidence in rodents suggests that creatine supplementation modestly shifts the composition of gut bacterial populations. Reducing certain firmicute species and increasing certain Bacteroidetes species in some studies, the implications for humans aren't clear and the magnitude of the effect appears small. More relevant for supplementing individuals, the gastrointestinal discomfort sometimes associated with loading protocols. Nausea, bloating, loose stools may be partly mediated by what happens when high creatine concentrations reach the colon. High concentrations there affect osmotic balance and provide substrate for microbial fermentation, both of which can cause GI symptoms. Large doses passing into the colon create an osmotic challenge that draws water into the gut lumen and provides substrate for fermentation, both of which can contribute to GI symptoms. This is another reason to avoid loading with single very large doses. The GI effects are not just transporter saturation, but partly microbiome mediated. For the standard 3 to 5 gram maintenance dose, these considerations are minimal. The dose is well within the small intestine's absorption capacity, minimal creatine reaches the colon, and the microbiome impact is negligible. The gut creatine story is interesting and actively being studied, but for practical purposes, the message is, take moderate doses, stay hydrated, and the microbiome angle doesn't require special attention. For completeness, there's a related gut question worth addressing. Whether probiotics or prebiotics affect creatine metabolism in the colon and thereby influence absorption efficiency. The research on this specific interaction is essentially non-existent in the published literature. There's no evidence that particular probiotic strains either enhance or significantly impair creatine absorption. The populations of creatine metabolizing bacteria in the colon vary between individuals. Some populations may degrade more supplemental creatine than others, but quantifying this effect and its practical significance hasn't been studied in human supplementation trials. What can be said? A healthy, diverse gut microbiome is associated with better overall nutrient absorption and metabolic function. To the extent that gut health generally supports efficient nutrient transit and absorption in the small intestine, reducing the fraction that reaches the colon unabsorbed. It supports creatine absorption alongside all other nutrients. But this is not a creatine-specific argument. It's a general principle that gut health matters for supplementation efficiency. The practical upshot, there's no specific probiotic protocol that optimizes creatine absorption, and no specific gut bacteria you need to worry about degrading your supplemental creatine. Take your creatine in appropriately sized doses, stay hydrated, and let the small intestine's transporters do their job. There is one more emerging angle in the gut creatine relationship: the interaction between gut permeability and creatine absorption efficiency. Some individuals with compromised intestinal barrier function, sometimes called leaky gut, show reduced efficiency of active transport across the intestinal epithelium for various nutrients.